Yashodanandana Bhadajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhadajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivanajari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivanajari Yashodanandana Bhadajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhadajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivanajari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class at the most auspicious Sri Radhakalachandji Dham. Let's start with the Mangalacharna prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Going to do the Sanskrit and the English all together. Naram Chava Narotamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayam. Offer respectful obeisances unto the Their attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam that is troublesome to the heart is always praised with transcendental song. Chai, thank you so much for joining today. I want to first start by asking for the blessings of the Vaishnava. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking for the mercy and the blessings of the Vaishnavas with us today so that I might say something valuable. Thank you very much. We're going through chapter 16, verses 12 through 25 today with the focus on verses 24. Let's begin by reading the translations.
Text 12. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued, when the conditioned soul, Jiva, in the form of Maharaj Chitraketu's son, had spoken in this way and then left, Chitraketu and the other relatives of the dead son were all astonished. They cut off the shackles of their affection, which was due to their relationship with him, and gave up their lamentation.
After the relatives had discharged their duties by performing the proper funeral ceremonies and burning the dead child's body, they gave up the affection that leads to illusion, lamentation, fear, and pain. Such affection is undoubtedly difficult to give up, but they gave it up very easily.
Queen Krityadyuti's co-wives, who had poisoned the child, were very much ashamed, and they lost all their bodily luster. While lamenting, O king, they remembered the instructions of Angira and gave up their ambition to bear children. Following the directions of the Brahmins, they went to the bank of the Yamuna, where they bathed and atoned for their sinful activities.
Thus, enlightened by the instructions of the Brahmins, Angira and Narada, King Chitraketu became fully aware of spiritual knowledge. As an elephant becomes free from a muddy reservoir of water, King Chitraketu came out of the dark well of family life.
The king bathed in the water of the Yamuna, and according to prescribed duties, he offered oblation of water to the forefathers and demigods, very gravely controlling his senses and mind. He then offered his respects and obeisances to the sons of Lord Brahma, Angira and Narada.
Thereafter, being very much pleased with Chitraketu, who was a self-controlled devotee and surrendered soul, Narada, the most powerful sage, spoke to him the following transcendental instructions.
Narad gave Chitraketu the following mantra: O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, who are addressed by the Omkar, Pranav, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Lord Vasudeva, I meditate upon you. O Lord Pradyumna, Lord Anirudh, and Lord Shankarshana, I offer you my respectful obeisances. O reservoir of spiritual potency, O supreme bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are self-sufficient and most peaceful. O ultimate truth, one without a second, you are realized as Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagwan, and are therefore the reservoir of all knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Perceiving your personal bliss, you are always transcendental to the waves of material nature. Therefore, my Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. You are the supreme controller of the senses, and your expansions of form are unlimited. You are the greatest, and therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
The words and mind of the conditioned soul cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for material names and forms are not applicable to the Lord, which is entirely spiritual, beyond the conception of gross and subtle forms. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he, by his pleasure, protect us.
As pots made completely of earth are situated on earth after being created, and are transformed into earth again when broken, this cosmic manifestation is caused by the Supreme Brahman, situated in the Supreme Brahman, and annihilated in the same Supreme Brahman. Therefore, since the Supreme Lord is the cause of Brahman, let us offer him our respectful obeisances.
The Supreme Brahman emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and expands like the sky. Although untouched by anything material, it exists within and without. Nonetheless, the mind, intelligence, senses, and living force can neither touch him nor know him. I offer unto him my respectful obeisances.
Text 24. As iron has the power to burn when made red hot in the association of fire, so the body, senses, living force, mind, and intelligence, although merely lumps of matter, can function in their activities when infused with a particle of consciousness by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As iron cannot burn unless heated by fire, the bodily senses cannot act unless favored by the Supreme Brahman.
O transcendental Lord, who are situated in the topmost planet of the spiritual world, your 2 lotus feet are always massaged by a multitude of the best devotees with their lotus bud hands. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, complete in 6 opulences. You are the Supreme Person mentioned in the Purusha Shukta prayers. You are the most perfect, self-realized master of all mystic power. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Jai. So that is the conclusion of our verses for today, reading the translations. Let's briefly go back through and highlight some key points from the verses today. So beginning with text 12, we saw that the bonds of affection between King Chitraketu, his wives, and their son were described as the shackles of affection. And Srila Prabhupada actually says that the highest love in the material world is between a mother and their child. Yet still this bond is described as a shackle. And these verses actually go into why it's described as such. In the next verse, verse 13, it talks about that affection between them leads to illusion. So it leads to a higher attachment and association, identification with the bodily concept of life. This also leads to lamentation, fear, and pain. When we have affection for our children, we naturally worry for them. Same if we have affection for anyone else's body. So these sorts of attachments, although natural, is what causes this illusion. So we can see that in the following verses, King Chitraketu was freed from this illusion because he was so willing to surrender and give up this attachment to temporary material bodily identification with life. So after they bathed and atoned for their sinful actions, you can see it's described that King Chitraketu became fully aware in spiritual knowledge. He came out of the dark well of material life. But before that, it's described, he was willing to again surrender those attachments. Prahlad actually says something very similar in relation to family life, that there's that it's a bottomless well of no nectar. That the true nectar lies in our relationship, loving transcendental service with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we can see that in the rest of the verses, King Chitraketu received some instruction from his spiritual master Narada Muni. Now he was qualified to receive such instruction because it said he gravely controlled his senses and his mind. You can see that grave mood of King Chitraketu following the death of his dear son and returning to full transcendental knowledge, spiritual awareness, Krishna consciousness. He had this very grave mood. He was very sober. And so it was much easier for him to control his mind and his senses. Because of this, Narada Muni was very pleased with King Chitraketu and gave him some nice instructions. We can read the prayers following, where a beautiful glorification of our Supreme Lord. So we can go on to our focus verse for today. 24. Indriya prana mano yadam savidha pracharanti karmasu Naivan yadalao hamiva prataptam Tane shutadra strapadeshamiti Dehendriya prana manodihomi Yadam savidha pracharanti karmasu Naivan yadalao hamiva prataptam Tane shutadra strapadeshamiti Dehendriya prana manodihomi Yadam savidha pracharanti karmasu Naivan yadalao hamiva prataptam Tane shutadra strapadeshamiti. Please repeat. Indriya prana manodyomi Radam savidha pracharanti karmasu Adivantyamamto hamiva pradaptam Aneshitadra strapadeshamiti Dehendriya prana manodyomi Shutadrasta Padeshamiti. Pranamanotiyomi. Padam Savidha Pracharanti Karmashu. Ayanti Ajayo Prataptam. Aneshutadrasta Padeshamiti. Jai Haribo. Let's read the translation together. The body, indriya, senses, prana, life, airs, mana, mind, diya, and intelligence, ami, all those, yat, amsa, vidha, being influenced by rays of Brahman or the Supreme Lord. Pracharanti, they move. Karmasu, in various activities. Na, not. Eva, indeed. Anyada, at other times. Loham, iron. Eva, like. Apraptam, tam. By fire. Saneshu, in those circumstances. Tat, that. Drastra, apadesham. They name subject matter. Eti, achieves. As iron has the power to burn when made red hot in the association of fire, we can do it all together as well. As iron has the power to burn when made red hot in the association of fire, so the body, senses, living force, mind, and intelligence, although merely lumps of matter, can function in their activities when infused with the particle of consciousness. As heated by fire, the bodily senses cannot impact unless favored by the Supreme Lord. Would anyone like to read the purport?
Red hot iron can burn, but it cannot burn the original fire. Therefore, the consciousness of the small particle of Brahman is fully dependent on the power of the Supreme Brahman. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Matas pratir jnanam apohanang cha. From me, the conditioned soul receives memory, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The power for activities comes from the Supreme Lord, and when the Lord withdraws this power, the conditioned soul no longer has energy with which to act through his various senses. The body includes 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, 5 active senses, and the mind. But actually, these are merely lumps of matter. For example, the brain is nothing but matter. But when electrified by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the brain can act, just as iron can burn when made red hot by the influence of fire. The brain can act while we are awake or even while we are dreaming. But when we are fast asleep or unconscious, the brain is inactive. Since the brain is a lump of matter, it does not have independent power with which to act. It can act only when favored by the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Brahman or Parabrahman. This is the way to understand how the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, is present everywhere, just as the sunshine is present because of the sun god in the sun globe. The Supreme Lord is called Hrishikesha. He is the only conductor of the senses. Unless empowered by his energy, our senses cannot act. In other words, he is the only seer, the only worker, the only listener, and the only active principle or supreme controller.
Hi. All glories to our Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. So this verse talks about how we are fully dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Now, sometimes we don't always act like we are, but nonetheless, the fact of how energy works is that without that influence of energy, that life-giving force from the Supreme Lord, we cannot act. And that everything that's happening in the world is all due to that mercy of our Supreme Lord. Now, we can repay this with gratitude and engage devotional service. In the material world, we come under this illusion that we are the doer or the controller. And even when we are not fully realized enough to act with complete knowledge and love of God, we can still engage our senses appropriately and properly by devoting them to Lord Krishna's service. You can practice this. We do practice this through arti. Our artis are an offering back of what the Supreme Lord already has under his control, the 5 elements, and what he already has in his possession. We know that he does not need anything, but we can offer this back to him as an act of our gratitude. Sometimes we can also realize where maybe we're not doing this. We can see parts of our life where we might not be engaging something we have properly in Krishna's service. So then we can pause and reflect and try to re-engage those elements of our life properly. This way, our whole life can be worship, one big moving prayer to Krishna, one big moving act of gratitude. And as we dovetail every part of our life, we can then also have every moment be an opportunity to connect with Krishna, and for Krishna to also connect with us, to clean our heart and make it a more suitable environment for him to reside in. In this verse, it talks about how Narada Muni gave the instructions to King Chitraketu once he qualified himself. It's very pleasing to our Supreme Lord and our spiritual masters when we're very sober. We try to control ourselves, especially so when we're fully self-controlled, although it's easier said than done. And also when we are ready for and asking for to engage in devotional service. So, it's been talked about before. We know, of course, we have some new people. So I'd like to go through it again, that the way to approach Krishna is through Radharani. Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna is Radha's property. And so we can receive her mercy and approach Krishna. Then also, to approach Radharani, we must attain the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. And to approach Lord Chaitanya, we receive the mercy of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. And to receive the mercy of Lord Nityananda, we can please our spiritual master. And to please our spiritual master, we can follow his instructions. So through that process, we can qualify ourselves and approach Lord Krishna to engage in loving devotional personal service. Now, what is dependence on the Lord? This is very pleasing to him because it's actually our factual constitutional position. So this dependence is a complete reliance. Now, this is factually the matter anyway, but when we also engage our thoughts and our mind, our intelligence, and our actions into Lord Krishna's service, knowing that we are fully dependent on him, and actually he is performing all these activities himself, that material nature is performing all of these activities, it can simply become a relationship of gratitude, appreciation, and reciprocal love. So instead of this, oftentimes we, in the material world, we feel ourselves act through ego. This idea of I, me, and mine, or greed, or hoarding possessions. This is actually a very unnatural position for us as spirit souls. We've become tangled in this web of these reactions, but actually, we don't really want this. It's not our full satisfaction. So in Bhagavad Gita 10.8, it says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. Krishna says, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So, we can become the wise who perfectly know this, or at least the ones who listen very nicely to how Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam lay this out for us, that we are already completely dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Lord, and factually everything in existence emanates from Him. And then we can engage in His service with all our hearts. So that part with all our hearts is that expression of gratitude and love for what we receive from the Supreme Lord. Then also we do not need to lament our condition, because everything can then become that expression of gratitude. In the verse it talks about how when King Chitraketu and his family were willing to give up the shackles of affection, they then were able to see clearly. So similarly, we can remember and depend on the Supreme Lord to help us release ourselves from the shackles that bind us in our everyday life. And then we can also remember that we are always cared for and provided for. In verse 25, it talks about also the qualifications of the Supreme Lord. It says He is the most perfect, the self-realized master of all mystic power. So we can see He's also very worthy and deserving of our loving devotional service and our complete gratitude. Even if it wasn't in His desire for us to be separate, or even to have the illusion that we're separate from Him, He still allows us to explore in this world and engage in activities that are sometimes harmful to us, or at least give us the illusion that we are suffering or lamenting those conditions. So this way, as we are clearing our heart and returning back into our original constitutional position, this very natural, secure position for us to offer loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, we can make every action we can a moment to offer that gratitude and praise to the glories of our Supreme Lord. So I'd like to open it up for discussion, questions, comments on the verses.
Hare Krishna. I was waiting for someone else, but I'll go. I really appreciate the point you made earlier, and you just emphasized it again, that every moment is an opportunity to express our gratitude and to make an offering of love to Krishna. You said even a dance, I believe, that our life can be like, or maybe I just heard that, like I was thinking dancing through life with the mood of gratitude. Like maybe externally we're not dancing, but in our heart, somehow I just had this image of a grateful person as a dancing person. Like, if you're feeling grateful, then what else do? You naturally want to express your joy. And how do we express our joy but through singing and dancing? So I really appreciate the emphasis there on gratitude and making the most of every opportunity to serve Krishna. Thank you.
I feel like when we're under the material condition, part of our heart like shuts down, becomes clouded, and we're not really ready for the full embrace yet, maybe. That's part of why we're still here, right? Is maybe we're not ready for that full embrace. We might still have some desires or illusion, or some of that illusion of lamentation, fear, and pain that could be blocking us. But gratitude, I feel like, opens our heart and allows us to start to engage in a dance through life. Yes?
I really appreciated how you said our whole life can become one big moving prayer and an act of gratitude. That was so beautiful. And to supplement that, you later said we need not lament. Everything becomes an expression of gratitude. So basically what is, we have these bursts of gratitude and we have these bursts of lamentation also. So, but if we take the lamentation away, we are left with just gratitude. So that was also a very beautiful aspect. Thank you.
Also, just a quick point. Related to the class today and yesterday, this knowledge, it's kind of heavy on detachment from family. And without a mature understanding, it's very easy that someone could be very cold and really hurt someone in their family. Even there's an example of this one devotee who got lost as a child in India and ended up in Mayapur. Vedasara Prabhu is in Atlanta. And he was very young after his... Is there another microphone? Hare Krishna. Yeah, his parents spent years searching all over India for him, and they finally found him at ISKCON Mayapur. And they said, "We're your parents, we've missed you so much." And in this mood, he said, "Well, which parents are you?" Can you imagine the heartbreak? He said, "Shri Shri Radha Madhava are my parents." Yeah, so without a mature understanding, yeah, he's an amazing Vaishnava, and he's matured incredibly. Yeah, I just was thinking that out of gratitude, we need to not neglect even materialistic people who have helped us along our way. Old teachers and friends and family. We may not want to associate with them very intimately, but still we should give all due gratitude for especially our parents who have done so much to raise us into adults. Hare Krishna.
Jai, thank you so much for bringing up that point, Prihat Prabhu. I feel like also sometimes when we think of detachment, it feels cold, but we're meant to actually become more neutral, kind of like Krishna is very neutral, but he engages in a very loving way with us and according to what we need. And for this, for me personally, I had this misunderstanding. And it was when my spiritual master recommended that Srila Prabhupada is our example. He was very detached, but he still engaged in a loving way with all his disciples and everyone who came. He acted in such a compassionate manner. And in that qualities of a more advanced devotee, we also see Krishna in the heart of every living entity. And that awareness of Krishna consciousness leads us to, do respect to all living entities. And then also when we remember to engage in a way that's pleasing to the Supreme Lord, that wouldn't be like cold and unfeeling.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say I like that point too about making one's life like a consistent walking, maybe even dancing prayer. But I just wanted to ask, how could we practically do that or practically remember that? Because sometimes we might have things to do, like, oh yeah, taxes are coming up. It's almost February already. Got to do your taxes. Brushing your teeth. Different sleeping in, different things like that might seem mundane. And I'd just like to hear some expansion on this idea.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that question. For me personally, and I encourage everyone to do the same, it starts with the taking stock of what do we do in our life? How can we engage or dovetail this in Krishna's service? And then also, even for mundane matters, remembering why we're doing what we're doing, and then dedicating that in our heart. It can be difficult because our mind is as voracious and uncontrollable as the wind, as Arjuna says. But we can always try to dovetail what we're doing in Krishna's service in some way. If we're doing our taxes, it's so that we can be financially balanced and be able to actively engage in Krishna's service, and even sometimes engage the Lakshmi that we've been allotted in Krishna's service. If we're brushing our teeth, it's to maintain our body and our health. We know our teeth is very important to our overall maintenance and bodily health, and then we can enthusiastically engage in Krishna's service. And then it also comes back to that attitude of gratitude. If we maintain that at every moment, always turning back to, this can only be happening because of Krishna's will. What can I learn in this moment? How can I please Krishna in this moment? Even if it's simply in our mood or our mind, this practice of Krishna consciousness is to become always conscious of Krishna. So we can actually practically engage this way by always remembering, what are we doing and why are we doing it? In what way is this for Krishna? And then also asking the guidance of our senior mentors, our gurus and other Vaishnavas. How can I purify my consciousness to think of what I'm doing in the right way? Maybe someone can help us take stock of what's in our life and how we can engage that in Krishna's service. It can be very easy for us to say some things in Krishna's service, and maybe we can refine it a little more. So our guru and our simple devotees can always help us engage practically in our life in a loving and grateful way. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I was looking at text 14 where it says that the co-wives of Krityaduti, who had killed the child, they went to perform austerities and things. And it says they gave up their, after remembering the instructions of Angira, they gave up their ambition to bear children. So I was thinking that, it's like we see people who have bad marriages and they suffer in marriage, and then we might think, oh, I'm not going to get married because people suffer in marriage. Or we see people have children and they struggle with children, the children cause them a lot of trouble and anxiety. I'll save myself the anxiety. I won't have to. In one sense, it's kind of just opting for the easy life, just like the path of least resistance. And I can understand that there's merit to that, but there's also a higher principle, that you do things in the service of the Lord, like what you were just saying. Because the instructions that Angira gave them was the science of the soul, right? That we're all spiritual, we're not these bodies, bodily relationships are temporary, so don't get too attached. But the process of bhakti goes beyond just, atma tattva. It's like developing a loving relationship with Krishna and helping others to try to also develop their relationships with Krishna. And when potentially mundane activities and relationships like, family life, getting married, having children, raising children, are done in the service of Krishna, right? To work with this person to try to advance or serve Krishna together, to bring these souls that have taken birth in my family back home, back to Godhead, to teach them the process of bhakti and engage them. Then it's a different story, then it's like, because if someone would read this and think, oh yeah, I'm not gonna enter family life because it's problematic, then I think that's kind of like a low level of spiritual understanding. A higher level of spiritual understanding is that, no, I'm going to do this as a service to Krishna because there's so much potential for spiritual advancement and for myself and others if I do.
Jai, I really appreciate that point, the highlighting the difference between personal ambition and service to Krishna. So I feel like the key word in the verse you highlighted is they gave up the ambition to have children. So it was more of like something they were wanting to fulfill their personal desire. And oftentimes we can have personal ambition to improve our own life in some way. But that is still us trying to kind of enjoy without Krishna. And so we can still dovetail those desires and try to develop that proper mood of, I would like to do this for Krishna as an act of gratitude, as an act of loving service, and even in a fully surrendered way. We can come to this understanding that because we are factually fully dependent on the mercy of the Lord, we can also be fully surrendered and engage in that way and have that understanding of anything that's preventing us from being fully surrendered is parts of illusion and misidentification. And so then we can pray to hopefully fully surrender as soon as we can. Yes, Juno?
So I was thinking about how, Prabhupada Priya, you said it's a low understanding to not have children. And I think, honestly, there are like enough children in the world of people who, and they're going to have to like die and be reborn and keep doing that and keep going through like material reproduction. But I feel like if we stopped like the idea of, oh, we need to reproduce, then we could take care of the people who are already like on the planet. Like we could actually better use our time instead of like prolonging our genetic codes. Like there's enough people who need our help genuinely, rather than saying, oh well, I'm gonna be the harborer of like affection and stuff, because I feel like affection is kind of like a material thing. It seems to me like having family or having children is actually kind of selfish. So I don't think it's a low perspective. I think that it could actually be kind of a good perspective to not have, you know, a family, not have material prolonging of the genetics. Just because I'm thinking about all these people who don't have access to like Krishna consciousness, and instead of like creating new people, being like these ones can be the ones that are Krishna conscious, there are so many out there that like need Krishna consciousness and don't have access to it, right? So maybe we could even better use our time instead of, you know, popping out babies, but use the ones that are already there and kind of heal them, right? So
yeah, that's actually a really valid choice. Some couples do make that choice in Krishna consciousness to just engage their life completely to the Sankirtan mission, to spreading the holy names and the teachings of the Lord. So it's a valid choice. They're still kind of having children, so to speak, because they're nurturing younger souls. There's also the fact of like, even if we all agreed in the world to stop having kids, there would still be souls that would need to be born in the material world to burn their karma or to come into Krishna consciousness in some way. So there's still a need for that. There's also Vaishnavas who want to come to this earth and participate in Lord Chaitanya's movement that's happening here on earth now, the golden age from the golden avatar. So we can fulfill the desire of these souls by also agreeing to engage in service in that way and nurturing and upbringing these souls that want to come participate in this very special movement. It's just different ways of looking at it. I think Prabhupada Priya's point, which she can clarify if she wants, is more that the lower understanding is I'm not going to engage because I don't really feel like having kids type of thing. You know, I feel like it's too much trouble or something like that. When more proper attitude is I'm willing to do anything necessary to please the Lord. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning Juno, for commenting on that.
Yeah, I'm thinking what you were just saying, the point Prabhupada Priya was making, is there in the Gita that there's renunciation in the different states of consciousness.
Yeah.
And renunciation for someone who is in a lower state of consciousness is because it's difficult. I don't want to have a family because it's hard.
Yeah.
Versus someone who is at a higher state of consciousness, they do what needs to be done. This is in, I believe it's chapter 18 of the Gita. Rather than, I don't want to do it because I don't want the trouble. No, I'm willing to take on some trouble for helping others. And so that could manifest as having a family, or it could manifest as not having a family. But either way, my purpose is to help people become pure devotees and make this world a happier place. So whether that's my own children or whether it's seeing others as that kind of like a child. Yeah, taking on disciples. Yeah. And I'll just add that just because one is in family life doesn't mean they can't also be gurus and they can't be fully part of the Sankirtan movement. In fact, everyone in South India who saw Lord Chaitanya, they were like, I want to give up my family and work and just be a monk with you. And he said, no, you stay where you are and you be a guru by telling everyone about the teachings of the Gita. You always chant the holy names, you always study and teach the scripture, and you're a guru. So there's not a need to be free from family life to be in that role.
That's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for making it. Yes, Daniel?
Hare Krishna, thank you for teaching. I don't think this can be said enough. Our whole life can be one big moving prayer to Krishna. Our whole life can be one big moving prayer to Krishna. Our whole life can be one big moving prayer to Krishna. And I had some reflection, and I appreciated what Prabhupada Priya said and what Juno said about having children, because I think that it really reflected to me that a lot of times in class I see things in dualities because I'm conditioned in this world to see things that way. And so when something is said to me, I think this is an absolute. This is a duality. How can I measure this? What is on the outside? What makes this not actually, where does this not apply? But actually I'm coming to understand what is being said is not that it applies all the time to everything, but it is a general aspect looked in this perspective that is applied in this context now. And that's just what I'm coming to understand. And I think that, yeah, like, from what I understand, it was not saying everyone should have a family, but saying if you choose not to or to have one, it should be done not for the path of least resistance, which is still sense gratification, or me and mine, sense gratification, versus devotional service. And yeah, I don't know, I just really appreciated like seeing myself, I guess, like in the way that I see things through a question that was asked, and go, oh, I do that. I understand. That makes sense. Anyways, thank you. I had another reflection. I was thinking about how Radha is our path to Krishna, and I was thinking, well, because only she knows how to make the perfect home for him. Only she knows exactly how he likes everything. So of course he is owned by her. And I thought, so I wrote, Lord Krishna, I want to make a home for you in my heart, but when I clean, I only spill mop water to clean again. It is never ending. How can I invite you to a place you already own? Dear Radha, please have compassion for me and clean my heart in the way only you know how to prepare a home for Krishna. There is a mountain I cannot begin to chip away at. Please have mercy on me and sculpt me as you desire Krishna to enjoy.
Haribo! Jai, one comment on that point. The purport from text 25, one of our verses today, talks about how we are not competent really to engage in Krishna service. But it's again that mercy of the Supreme Lord that allows us to engage, and absolutely that Srimati Radharani knows how to best please Lord Krishna. It's said that to please Krishna, we can offer things through Radha. We can give her the flower to offer to Krishna. That's very nice.
Hi. Such a beautiful class. I mean, everything has already been said, but since I'd already raised my hands. So the point to Prabhu's question about do we really need to have kids? No, there's, as we've all said, there's so many exalted devotees who treat their disciples as children. But for some of us, we have to go through that experience. And I can say for my personal self that having children gave me so much appreciation for all the mothers who have gone through this process. It's just, it opens your eyes to how much suffering all these mothers have gone through. And my love for my mother just went, you know. So that appreciation, sometimes we just have to go through that process. Also another process, like sometimes, you know, I was very, you know, oh, this person's sick because they did something wrong. And then I went through a life experience where I realized that sometimes people do fall sick, maybe some past life karma, but not really something that they've done. And that gives you so much compassion and understanding. So sometimes our lived life experiences give us a lot of compassion and understanding for everybody else around us instead of just judging them.
Beautiful point, Mother Tulsi Saki. Haribo. I've thought of before also that motherhood and fatherhood can lead us to a small fraction, inkling of understanding what Krishna goes through as our supreme father and mother of all living beings. If we think about the amount of energy and effort it takes to raise one child in the material world, what about Krishna, who pervades and supports the entire universe with just a small fragment of his being and things like that? The amount of energy and effort he constantly pours in to support all of life in the material and spiritual worlds. So another impetus for gratitude we can take forth. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, all glories to Sri Sri Radhikala Chandi. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.